it kind of gave off country vibes to me, which I didn't love. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. I am Molly, and in this video I am going to be ranking all of the studio albums by the Canadian rock band Metric. So Metric is a band that I've been familiar with for a while. I've never really gone through and listened to, especially their older albums, I'm not that familiar with. So I figured I would do a little ranking video, and it kind of gives me an excuse to go through and listen to their entire discography from beginning to end, because frankly, Metric is an awesome band with great music. So yeah, I'm really excited for this one. Let's get on into the ranking. So to give you all just a quick usual rundown of my ranking system, A+ is absolutely fantastic. Nothing I can fault the album for. A is extremely good. There's maybe a couple tiny little issues I have with the album, but fantastic overall. B is right in the middle, so just good. Nothing fantastic, but by no means bad. C is just kind of forgettable or boring. And then D is just my least favorites. Again, this is obviously a totally subjective ranking, but yeah, D is just the ones that fall to the bottom, fall a little short for me personally. So I'm going to go through all of Metric's albums in order of when they were released. So the first one I'm going to be talking about is Old World Underground, Where Are You Now? This one came out in 2003. And overall, this album to me is really enjoyable because of almost like the attitude, and there's a spunkiness about this album that is just great. It makes it really entertaining. There are some tracks on here that are just really punchy, for lack of a better word. They have a lot of great energy behind them. Hustle Rose is one that kind of started off, and I wasn't sure really what to think about it, but as the song progressed, I enjoyed it more and more and more. So Hustle Rose is a great one. Combat Baby is also on this album, and that song is fantastic. And then my favorite song on this album is Dead Disco. Fantastic song. I love that one. Again, just great energy behind it and super catchy. So overall, I like this album. I think for me, the big drawbacks are that there are some songs that I don't find myself compelled to listen to. There are some that are great, but to sit and listen through to this album, there's just some that I want to skip to get on to the ones I know I'm going to like more. I guess I would just like a better flow between the songs too. So in short, Old World Underground, great album, some fantastic tracks on here. To sit and listen through to it as an album overall, it's not my favorite from Metric, but it's still really good. I think Old World Underground, Where Are You Now? I think for now I'm just going to put it in B. I feel like it's just a solid album. It delivers what it needs to deliver. It has great energy. Next up, we have their album Live It Out. This was released in 2005, and this one I found Metric's sound to go in a little bit darker of a direction than their last album, and it kind of has a more, I guess you could say, traditional rock sound to it. Their first album was more like spunky, a little bit more, I guess, intense in the instrumentals, and Live It Out is just, it kind of brings it back in a little bit, and it has more of a traditional rock sound to it. It also has a few more tracks that are just more almost melancholy. They're just slower. And Live It Out, I did really enjoy this album, but there weren't really any tracks that stood out to me a lot. At least on Old World Underground, Where Are You Now? I found there were some tracks that I would go back to and replay over and over, and they were just super catchy. On Live It Out, I didn't really get that. I enjoyed this album, listening to it, but there really weren't any standout tracks for me. I will give a shout out to Too Little Too Late. I loved the guitar on this one, and then also the track Live It Out has kind of that punchiness that I kind of wanted more of on this album, to be honest, just to kind of give it a little bit of an energetic boost. So overall, Live It Out for me, I'm kind of torn on this one because I enjoyed it. It's just not really that memorable, I guess. So I think I'm gonna put Live It Out in C. It works okay as an album, but their first album, Old World Underground, Where Are You Now, just is more memorable, so that's why I would rank that one higher. Up next, we have Grow Up and Blow Away, released in 2007. This album, I think, is even more subdued than Live It Out. It's very understated, especially compared to their first album, which is all energy. I also noticed on Grow Up and Blow Away, Emily Haynes' vocals seem different, like they're almost higher. I don't know if that's intentional, but it was just something I noticed. It's not really a good or a bad thing about this album. It's just a difference that I noticed. I think this album too, there's more of an emphasis on the vocals and the instrumentals kind of fall into the background more. But overall, on Grow Up and Blow Away, the tracks to me all kind of sounded very similar. Again, there's not really any that stand out. There's also a couple tracks on this album where James Shaw does some of the vocals, so it's not all just Emily Haines singing. And there's almost like a call and response that goes on between the two, which again, it's kind of cool. I just don't know if it works for me personally. And there were a couple tracks that I didn't really get into. Like Rock Me Now almost is like spoken word set to music. Again, it kind of cool, I guess. I didn't personally love it, wasn't my favorite. So the bottom line is that Grow Up and Blow Away is not my favorite Metric album. I'm not hating on it necessarily, but it's just not my favorite. I think I'm going to put it in D. Again, like none of these albums are bad. I enjoy listening to all of these. It's just, for me, that one's a D. Up next is Metric's 2009 album Fantasies. Now this one I absolutely love. This album is fantastic. It is leaps and bounds, in my opinion, ahead of Metric's first 3 albums. It's so good. Their sound I feel like it matured really effectively, and they took all of the elements on their first 3 albums. They've got a little bit of the spunkiness from their first album, the rock sound from their second album, and then kind of some experimentation, I guess you could say, from their third album. They put it all on Fantasies, and it worked out great. The tracks on Fantasies flow together great. They also use more synths. I think there's more of an electronic influence on this album, which kind of has come to be, I feel like, Metric's signature sound, kind of blending like alternative rock with synth. They finally achieved that sound on Fantasies. Help I'm Alive as the starting track is fantastic, super, super catchy. It has a great rhythm to it. Twilight Galaxy is another great one. There's almost a fuzziness to this track that makes it really calming and just a nice, relaxing song to listen to. Gold Guns Girls is one of my favorite tracks on this album, super energetic, and coming right after Twilight Galaxy just again brings like a great punch of energy. And then the first Metric song I actually ever heard, and still to this day is probably one of, if not my favorite Metric song, is Gimme Sympathy. So Fantasies by Metric is just a great album in my opinion. There's no skips on it. I love every track. They work well together. So I'm going to be putting Fantasies in A+. Just a great album overall. I don't really have anything I can fault it for. Up next, we have Metric's 2012 album Synthetica. This one's great too. I found this album to kind of have like rock instrumentals with almost folk sounding vocals, and then you have the great bursts of synths coming in as well. So it's kind of like a blend of those 3 genres, like rock, folk, and electronic. There's also kind of a dreamy-like quality to Synthetica. I think it's less intense, less traditional, like rock, loud, in your face than all of their previous albums. Synthetica's just a little bit more, I don't want to say restrained. It just has kind of this dreamlike, trance-like quality to a lot of the tracks. For me, this album starts off fantastic. Like the beginning of this album, I love every track. Toward the end, it just loses me a tiny little bit. The tracks, to a certain extent, kind of start to sound similar. A quick shout out to some of the tracks I love. Artificial Nocturne as the opening track is so good. Again, has that dreamy atmospheric quality to it, which you kind of find throughout this entire album. Speed the Collapse is one of the tracks that kind of has that folk sound to it that I was talking about. Breathing Underwater, I think, is my favorite song on Synthetica. I love this one. It almost reminds me of M83. But then, like I said, toward the end of this album, there's just a couple tracks that I either lose interest in them or they're not my favorite. The Wanderlust, to be honest, I don't love the different vocals on this one. It kind of gave off country vibes to me, which I didn't love. But anyway, Synthetica, I'm kind of torn on this one. I really do enjoy this album. It has some great tracks. I think it works really well as an album. I think I'm going to put Synthetica in A. Up next, we have Pagans in Vegas. This album came out in 2015. Again, great use of the synths on this one. I think Pagans in Vegas is the most pop sounding album of, I think, all of Metric's discography, to be honest. Even more so than Synthetica. Synthetica uses the electronics and the synths in a more restrained, dreamy way. And then Pagans in Vegas, I think, uses the same sounds, but in a more upbeat pop sounding way. Pagans in Vegas, very similar to Synthetica again for me in that the beginning is fantastic. Toward the end of this album, it just loses me a little bit. The two toward the end, the Face 1 and the Face 2, I didn't find that these two added anything to the album. They just made the runtime longer. But overall, I do really enjoy Pagans in Vegas. Some of my favorites would definitely be The Shade. That one is super catchy. And then Celebrate is fantastic. This song just has kind of an expansive sound to it. And then Cascades is really cool too. I kind of like the distorted, robotic sounding vocals to it. So Pagans in Vegas overall, very similar to Synthetica in my opinion. It is a very enjoyable listen. There's just a few tracks I would maybe skip. So I think I'm going to put Pagans in Vegas in B. I'll put it above Old World Underground, Where Are You Now? I think I'm going to put Pagans in Vegas there. And last up, we have Metric's most recent album, Art of Doubt. This one came out in 2018, and I feel like this album kind of goes back a little bit more to their rock sound. They still use a lot of synth and electronic elements on this one, but it kind of has a more Fantasies vibe to it, where the electronics and synth are very balanced with the rock sound. But overall, I found all the elements that they used on their previous albums to use at some point on Art of Doubt, which is cool. It's like they take all of the good points of their previous work and they put it all on this album, and it just works great. For me, Art of Doubt has no skips. I really love every single track on this album. Dark Saturday is great. It kind of has like the attitude and spunkiness from their first album. Die Happy has some great energy to it. And then Dressed to Suppress might be my favorite track on Art of Doubt. I love this one. It almost sounds like they're performing live in a stadium. It just has this great big open sound to it. That's the only way I can describe it. But yeah, Art of Doubt I think is a fantastic album. So I'm going to put Art of Doubt in A+. I'll put it below Fantasies because Fantasies is, as to date, my favorite Metric album, hands down. But Art of Doubt is a close second. It's a really solid album, and it gets better every time I listen to it. So there you have it. That is my final Metric album ranking. So in A+, Perfection, we have Fantasies and Art of Doubt. In A, so extremely good still, we have Synthetica. In B, so solid albums, a few missteps, but really good, we have Pagans in Vegas and Old World Underground, Where Are You Now? In C, just a little bit forgettable, we have Live It Out. And then in D, which are the albums that just didn't work for me, we just have Grow Up and Blow Away. Alright, so that is it. That is going to wrap up my ranking of all of Metric's studio albums to date. Metric is a fantastic band. Definitely check out their music if you haven't heard of them. And all of these albums are great. I do love them. They all have some great tracks on them. I just thought this ranking would be kind of fun to do. And like I said, give me an excuse to listen to all of their albums from start to finish and just see what I think of them. But anyway, hopefully you all enjoyed this video. I definitely enjoyed making it. Thank you all so much for watching. Stay tuned, and I will see you next time.